Hey guys, tonight we're wandering down rutted, muddy lanes in the damp chill of a medieval dawn. You're somewhere in the rolling countryside where smoke curls lazily from thatched roofs. The air smells faintly of peat fires, and a cock crows in the distance. The world is quiet except for the muffled sounds of boots, your boots squelching in the muck as you begin a journey few peasants in your lifetime will ever attempt. You'll travel beyond the horizon, leaving your familiar hamlet behind. It sounds romantic, but you probably won't survive this. That's not me being dramatic. Between bandits' disease and weather odds are firmly against you. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there right now. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your hands grip a rough walking staff cut from a green hazel branch the day before. Its bark is still faintly damp, smelling of sap. You shift it between palms as you walk, partly to ease the strain on your legs and partly because it makes you feel less alone. The lane dips into a shallow hollow where rainwater from last night's downpour has gathered, reflecting the bruised blue-gray sky. You skirt it awkwardly, balancing on stones half hidden in the mud. Travel for someone of your standing, a peasant bound more to soil than to sky, is no casual undertaking. You don't just go somewhere. You break away. The year is somewhere in the late 14th century. Your world is narrow, a patchwork of open fields and hedgerows, maybe 30 miles wide in all directions, if you squint hard. You've never seen the sea, never seen a city wall higher than a church tower, never met someone whose speech doesn't carry the same lilting accent as yours. But today you're going farther than your neighbor's mill, farther even than the weekly market in the nearest market town. And that's unusual. Peasants in your century don't travel in the sense that future generations will. You're not hopping on a horse for leisure or striding down a paved road for sightseeing. You're walking slowly, heavily, because there's work worship or trouble that needs your feet to carry you elsewhere. And every step matters because your shoes are a joke. You've stuffed them with straw this morning to keep your toes from chafing raw against the hard leather. The straw tickles and shifts as you go. The sound of distant bells drifts across the fields, muffled by mist. You know it's from St. Wolfram's 3 miles away. Maybe you'll pass by it before noon. The bells are marking prime, the second hour of the monastic day, reminding the monks to pray, and in an indirect way reminding you of the slow, constant heartbeat of time itself. Monks travel, you think idly. Pilgrims too. But your journey is almost always tethered to necessity. Behind you, your village is a cluster of smoke-smudged huts fading into the fog. You glance back only once, partly to fix the sight in memory and partly to make sure you're truly leaving. The lane widens here, becoming a rutted cart track lined with hawthorn. Carts pass rarely. When they do, they splash mud on your legs. That's just how it is. Most goods still move by pack animal or on human backs. If you're lucky, you might catch a ride on a slow-rolling ox cart later in the day. You pass a fellow traveler, rare this early in the morning. He's hunched beneath a patched cloak, his hood pulled low. You exchange a nod, nothing more. You've learned not to ask questions. The road is safer when people are polite, but keep their business to themselves. Banditry isn't rampant, but it's common enough that lone wanderers keep their eyes sharp and their words sparse. A mile later, you reach a small wooden bridge over a sluggish brook. The bridge creaks ominously under your weight. and you pause in the middle to look down at the black water. Something about the current, slow and glassy, makes you think about how many have crossed here before you traders, tithers, maybe even fleeing serfs, who slipped away under cover of darkness. Travel in this time isn't just a movement from one place to another. It's a negotiation with risk. The sun is beginning to lift the mist now. You can make out the silhouettes of trees ahead forming the edge of a wood you'll have to cross. Woods are tricky. They can be shortcuts or death traps depending on who or what is inside them. Wild boar are a danger. So are robbers. And sometimes it's just the eerie, smothering quiet that sets your teeth on edge. Still, the alternative, skirting the wood and adding hours to your walk, isn't tempting. You press on. Under the trees, the air changes. It's cooler, damper, smelling of leaf mold and mushrooms. Shafts of light stab down through the canopy, catching motes of dust and gnats in golden suspension. You hear the distant tap, tap, tap of a woodpecker and the rustle of something moving in the undergrowth. Your walking stick feels heavier now. Halfway through, you come upon a wayside shrine, a weather-worn wooden cross mounted in a stone base, its figure of Christ faded almost to nothing. Someone's left a twist of wildflowers at its foot. You stop, not so much out of piety as habit. Cross yourself quickly, murmur a half-formed prayer for safety, and move on. Shrines like these are more than decoration, they're medieval travel insurance. When you emerge from the far side of the wood, the land opens in a rolling stretch of open-field agriculture. You can see peasants at work, bent double their backs, making slow, aching arcs as they weed or harvest. They glance up at you briefly, travelers are noteworthy, but return to their toil without a word. You know some of them, you've shared bread with them at harvest feasts. But today, you're an outsider moving through their strip fields. By late morning, your legs are burning and your stomach growls. You find a spot near a hedgerow, sit on a flat rock, and dig into the bread and cheese you brought, wrapped in cloth. The bread is coarse, flecked with bits of chaff. The cheese smells faintly of the cellar where it was stored. It's not much, but it fills you enough to keep moving. You sip from your leather flask, water, not ale this time, and wipe your mouth with the back of your hand. You think about how far you've come already. For a medieval peasant, even this distance, maybe 6 or 7 miles, is notable. Some never travel farther from home in their entire lives. Roads are thin lines between worlds, and each mile you walk is a thread pulled loose from the weave of your normal life. You don't yet know what's at the far end of this journey, but you walk on anyway, the horizon calling in a way you can't quite explain. Your boots damp from the morning's dew, and puddles begin to feel heavier as the sun climbs higher. The road narrows again into a single earthen track flanked by tall grass. Now and then your staff catches in a clump of weeds or knocks against a stone, half buried in the dirt. The steady rhythm of your steps merges with the far-off murmur of wind moving through grain fields. You're alone again, and though solitude is common in rural life, the road's emptiness presses on you differently than the quiet of your own fields. Out here, the silence isn't a pause, it's a question. You think about where most peasants travel and why. For most, the farthest journey they'll take in a year is to the nearest market town, maybe 2 or 3 times if there's need. A fair day, a saint's feast, or a sudden errand for your Lord might send you out. Pilgrimage is another reason, though. That's rare for someone without coin to spare or permission to leave the manor freely. Journeys like yours across miles that take hours to tread are the exceptions. Still, the path before you, feels like it's been worn by countless feet before yours, traders with their packs, drovers with their herds, messengers in service to some distant hall. You pass a small copse of elder trees. The air here is richer scented with blossoms that cling stubbornly to the last of their season. In the shade, you see a low, moss-covered stone, maybe once part of a boundary marker or a forgotten cross. These relics of the land whisper of older roads, ones that might have led to villages long gone, swallowed back into forest and pasture. Not all travel leads somewhere lasting. Sometimes roads outlive the places they were meant to connect. By midday, you spot movement ahead, a drover urging along a small herd of pigs. The animals shuffle with stubborn rhythm snouts, rooting in every patch of mud they can find. The drover, a wiry man with a stick, nods at you as you pass. His eyes are watchful. His job requires it. A stray pig can vanish into the undergrowth in moments. You trade a few words about the weather, and he tells you he's bound for the market, hoping for a good price before winter. That's his travel, a day's march there and back, his life measured in hooves and haggling. Not long after, the smell of wood smoke drifts across the lane. You come upon a tiny hamlet, 3 cottages, a byre, and a small stone chapel with a shingled roof. The hamlet sits on a rise above a bend in the road, its cottages huddled close against the wind. 2 children stand barefoot near a fence, staring at you as if you were a wandering minstrel instead of just another peasant on the move. Travelers are rare enough that even the ordinary carries a sheen of novelty. You wave, and one of them waves back shyly before ducking behind the fence. Past the hamlet, the road dips toward a shallow valley where a stream winds between meadows. A narrow ford cuts across it. The water is clear, running over smooth stones, but the footing is tricky. You lift your tunic slightly, plant your staff in the stream bed, and inch across, feeling the cold creep through your boots. On the far side, you stop to wring out the leather as best you can. Wet feet are dangerous on the road. Blisters can cripple a traveler faster than hunger. By early afternoon, the heat presses in, though it's the kind of mild warmth that would be pleasant if you weren't carrying yourself mile after mile. The landscape stretches in broad swaths of open field, punctuated by occasional hedgerows. In the far distance, you see a faint smudge of movement, a horseman riding at a leisurely pace. You keep to your side of the track, letting him pass without comment. Horsemen usually have a reason to travel: messengers, reeves, petty lords, and their business is best left to them. The road takes you past a windmill, its wooden sails turning slowly in the afternoon breeze. The miller, dusted white with flour, stands outside, speaking with a woman who's brought a sack of grain. You catch the warm smell of baking from a nearby oven. If you were richer or bolder, you might stop and buy a small loaf for the road. But bread baked for market costs coin, and your provisions, though humble, will do. You keep walking. You notice the quality of the road changing. Here it's firmer underfoot with patches of worn stone embedded in the earth. This is part of an old Roman road still lingering centuries after the empire faded from this land. These ancient ways, straighter and more solid than anything your own time can build, are the skeleton of travel in your century. But they're also lonely places, stretching without shelter between villages. A sudden squall, a turn of bad luck, and you could be far from help. The afternoon wears on, and your thoughts grow hazy with the rhythm of your steps. You pass between 2 tall willows, whose branches form a kind of arch over the path. The shadows beneath are cool and dappled, the light shifting as the leaves tremble in the breeze. You hear the faint rush of water ahead, and soon come up another brook, this one spanned by a narrow plank bridge. A cart waits on the far side, its driver leaning against the wheel, while his oxen drink from the stream. He nods at you, but says nothing. Beyond the brook, the road climbs again. Your calves ache, and the weight of your small bundle tugs at your shoulder. From the crest of the rise, you can see far ahead a patchwork of green and gold fields, a scattering of woods, and there, like a smudge of ink against the sky, the spire of a church in the town you're aiming for. It's still several miles away, but its presence feels like a promise. Reaching it will mean food shelter, perhaps even news of the wider world. The sun is angling west now, gilding the edges of the clouds. Shadows stretch across the fields, and the air cools enough to lift the hair on your arms. You think again of home, of the hearth you left that morning, and the familiar creak of your own door. Out here, there's no guarantee of a warm welcome, but that's part of travel in your time. You take your chances where you can. You adjust your staff, take a deeper breath, and begin the next long stretch of road toward the town. Each step brings you closer, though you can already feel the creeping fatigue in your legs. Evening will come before you know it, and with it, the question every traveler must answer: where will you sleep tonight? The air grows softer as the day tips toward evening, the sun dipping low enough to set the road aglow in amber light. The town's spire ahead seems no closer than it did an hour ago, as if distance in this land stretches and contracts at will. Your boots thud against the hardening track, each step marked by the faint crunch of grit under leather. The road here skirts a meadow gone golden in the waning sun, the grass whispering in a lazy breeze. You think about how travel changes as night draws near. In daylight, even a lone traveler can find courage in the familiar look of hedgerows and open sky. But as shadows lengthen, every bend in the road becomes a pocket of uncertainty. Medieval roads aren't patrolled, aren't lit, aren't safe. If the weather turns or the dark falls faster than you expect, the world can shrink into a strip of path barely visible under your feet. That's when the thought of shelter becomes urgent. The town you're heading for isn't large, nothing like the great walled cities you've heard about in rumors from traders. It's a market town serving the surrounding villages with a handful of stone buildings among the timber-framed houses. There's an inn there, you've been told. And an inn means more than ale and a bed. It means a hearth news from passing travelers, maybe even music if fortune is kind. But reaching it before nightfall will take the rest of your strength. You pass a boundary stone, its surface worn smooth by centuries of weather. Someone has scratched a crude mark into it, a symbol you don't recognize. These markers are waypoints of a sort, signs that you've entered the lands under another lord's jurisdiction. For a peasant, that matters. The rules can shift from one boundary to the next. Different tolls, different taxes, different expectations of service. You travel with quiet caution, knowing you're no longer under the familiar gaze of your own reeve. The path descends toward a hollow, where a cluster of cottages huddles close to the road. Smoke drifts lazily from their chimneys, and the smell of stewing cabbage mingles with the damp scent of earth. A woman in a kerchief is drawing water from a well, her bucket groaning on the rope. She glances up as you pass, but says nothing. You're a stranger here, and strangers are met with guarded eyes. In villages, people know everyone's face, yours is new. Beyond the cottages, the land flattens into open field again. You spot a flock of geese grazing near a pond, their heads bobbing up and down like cautious sentinels. A boy with a switch sits on a fence rail watching them. He eyes you with the same quiet suspicion as the woman at the well. In times like these, when food is precious and law-thin trust doesn't come quickly. A mile further on the road cuts through a low stretch of marshland. The air here is cooler, heavy with the smell of water and decay. The ground squelches faintly underfoot, and your boots pick up a film of mud that clings stubbornly. In the reeds, a frog croaks. Somewhere deeper in the marsh, a splash echoes a bird maybe, or something larger. You keep moving. Marshes are places of ill luck where travelers can lose the path and vanish. In the fading light, the narrow strip of raised earth feels like a lifeline. By the time you reach firmer ground, the sun is a sliver on the horizon, bleeding gold and red into the sky. The spire is closer now. You can see the faint outline of the rooftops clustered around it. But the shadows are longer, darker, and the first star is winking into view. You quicken your pace every step, a calculation you might just make it before true night closes in. As you near the town, the road broadens and shows more signs of use. Wheel ruts cut deep into the earth, and hoof prints are pressed into the softer patches. You pass a wayside cross, sturdier than the one in the forest earlier, its carved figure intact. Someone has hung a small token from it, a strip of ribbon or cloth fluttering in the evening air. These offerings are prayers in tangible form, left by those who've passed and wished for safe travel or a blessing on a loved one far from home. You touch the base of the cross, in passing more out of habit than hope, but it steadies you all the same. At last, you see the outer edge of the town. A shallow ditch runs along one side of the road, beyond which a low palisade marks the settlement's boundary. A single gate stands open, watched by a man in a faded tunic with a spear. He glances at you, but doesn't challenge you. Peasants with nothing worth stealing are rarely worth a guard's trouble. You pass through without a word, feeling the strange mix of relief and exposure that comes with entering a place not your own. Inside, the road narrows again, hemmed in by timber-framed houses that lean toward each other over the street. The air smells of hearth smoke ale and the faint tang of livestock penned somewhere nearby. Voices echo from deeper within the town, merchants calling out as they pack away their stalls, women haggling over the last of the day's bread, children laughing in the alleyways. The sound is comforting in its ordinariness, yet it underscores just how far from home you now are. You make your way toward the center, where the church stands at the heart of the market square. Even at this hour, a few traders linger packing carts or counting coins. You scan the edges of the square until you spot a sign hanging over a doorway, a crude painted image of a boar. The inn. You step inside, blinking against the sudden shift from cool dusk to warm firelight. The room is low-ceilinged, the air thick with the smell of roasting meat and spilled ale. A man behind the counter glances up, sizing you in a heartbeat. You're not a wealthy guest, but you have coin enough for the cheapest bed and a bowl of whatever's on the fire. That's all that matters. He gestures toward a bench near the hearth. You sit grateful for the heat soaking into your tired legs and set down your bundle. For tonight at least you've reached your stopping point. The warmth from the hearth seeps into your bones, coaxing the stiffness from your legs. Around you, the murmur of voices rises and falls, like the tide punctuated now and then by the clink of wooden mugs or the crackle of a log shifting in the fire. You take in the inn with slow glances. It's no grand hall, just a low room with heavy beams overhead, rushes scattered across the floor, and tables worn to a soft sheen by years of elbows, tankards, and spilled ale. Travelers have always gathered in places like this. Even in your century when the roads are rough and journeys uncertain, the inn is a small island of familiarity. You hear scraps of conversation in the dialect you know well, mixed with the lilting accents of those from farther afield. There's talk of prices in the market, of weather in the coming weeks, of news from a fair in another town. The topics are humble, but they bind people together, shared concerns that pass easily between strangers over a shared fire. A serving woman sets a wooden bowl before you, thick stew with barley, and a few shreds of meat, probably mutton or pork. It smells of onions and herbs, and the steam carries the promise of warmth deeper than the fire can offer. Beside it, a hunk of bread, dense and dark from rye. You dip the bread into the stew, letting it soak before biting into it. The flavors are earthy plain, and you savor them as if they were a feast. Hunger after a day's travel sharpens every taste. On the bench beside you, a man with weather-creased skin leans toward the fire, his hands wrapped around a mug. He catches your eye and nods the universal gesture that says, "We're both here and that's enough. You might speak later, but for now the silence is comfortable." In the inn, no one needs to account for why they've come. The road itself is reason enough. Later, as the fire burns lower, you hear the faint scrape of a stool on the floor and look over to see a man in a patched jerkin producing a small stringed instrument, nothing fine but capable of a tune. His fingers pluck tentatively at first, then with more confidence, a simple melody winding into the air. It's not a song for dancing, just a slow, lilting strain that matches the rhythm of the fire's flicker. You find yourself leaning back, eyes half closing, letting the notes braid themselves with the low hum of voices. Night deepens outside. The door opens now and again to admit another latecomer, letting in a gust of cool air and the smell of damp earth. Most are locals who live within a short walk, but one or two carry the look of travelers like yourself, dust on their boots, a guarded gaze that eases only once they've settled near the fire. You recognize the small rituals, loosening the straps of a pack, rubbing the knees, after a long walk looking around for a place to rest. When it's time to sleep, the innkeeper leads you up a narrow stair to a small loft. There's no private chamber, just a row of pallets laid side by side, each with a thin blanket. You find an empty one and set your bundle down beside it. The room smells faintly of straw and old wool. You lie down, pulling the blanket over your shoulders, listening to the creaks of the building as it settles into the night. Somewhere below, the last embers of the fire hiss softly. Sleep comes slowly. You think about the miles you've walked, the sights you've passed, the marshland, the hamlets, the windmill turning against the sky. Travel for a peasant is rarely about the destination alone. It's a thread of moments stitched together by the simple act of putting one foot before the other. And tomorrow the thread will lengthen. Dawn comes early. You wake to the sound of roosters crowing somewhere beyond the town walls, their calls weaving into the muffled stir of voices from below. The air is cool against your skin as you pull on your boots, still a little stiff from yesterday's damp crossing at the ford. You shoulder your bundle, grip your staff, and make your way down to the common room. The fire has been coaxed back to life, and the smell of baking bread mingles with the sharper tang of ale being poured into mugs. You take a simple breakfast bread, a little cheese and water, before stepping out into the fresh light of morning. The market square is already waking, merchants setting up stalls, a man leading a laden mule toward the edge of town, a woman arranging baskets of onions on a table. You follow the road that leads out past the church, its bell marking the first hour of the day. Beyond the palisade, the countryside opens again, fields glistening with dew. The air is crisp, and for a while your steps feel lighter. But the road ahead is long, and each bend holds its own unknowns. The first travelers you meet are a pair of monks, their brown habits gathered at the waist, with rope belts, their sandals dusted from the road. They greet you with a soft Pax Vobiscum and continue on their way, their heads bent in quiet conversation. Monks travel for reasons that peasants rarely can service to their order visits to other houses, errands that take them across the breadth of a diocese. You watch them until they vanish into the shimmer of morning light. By mid-morning, you come upon a toll point, a narrow stretch of road where a wooden barrier stands across the way. A man in a faded surcoat waits beside it, a spear propped casually in one hand. He asks for a small coin to pass. It's not much, but for a peasant, every coin counts. You pay without protest, knowing that to argue is to risk more than the cost itself. This is part of the reality of travel. Even the road demands its price. Past the toll, the road dips into a shaded stretch lined with tall poplars. Their leaves murmur overhead, the sound like distant rain. You walk in that green-gold light, thinking about how in your time the road is both freedom and tether. It can take you away, but it also ties you to its course, pulling you toward places you can't quite see yet. The poplars thin, and the road opens again to rolling pasture land, the grass rippling in the faintest breeze. In the distance, you see a few cattle grazing, their hides shining in the morning sun. A herdsman stands watch near a dry stone wall, his dog weaving back and forth, keeping the animals clustered. He glances toward you, but doesn't call out. In the countryside, strangers are acknowledged with the smallest of nods, as if to say, "I see you, and that is enough." The road here is drier, firmer underfoot. Wheel ruts etched into its surface tell you that carts have been this way recently, though none appear now. You walk on your staff, tapping the ground with an easy rhythm. Every so often you notice wildflowers along the verge, small, stubborn blooms that cling to the dust and seem to thrive despite the hooves and boots that pass beside them. They remind you that travel is as much about noticing the small passing things as it is about reaching some far goal. Before long, you come to a fork in the road. One track is narrow, clearly less traveled, winding off toward the hills. The other, broader and more worn, continues straight ahead. For a peasant in your time, the choice is simple. You take the well-used road. Wandering into the hills without purpose is a fool's errand, an invitation to get lost or worse. Still, you glance toward the hills for a moment, wondering what lies there. Old ruins, perhaps, or villages so small they barely make a mark on any map. You choose the main road and soon pass a line of pack horses led by a man in a faded cloak. Their backs are loaded with goods bound for the next market, perhaps wool or sacks of grain. He keeps a firm hold on the lead rope, the horse's hooves thudding softly on the packed earth. You exchange brief greetings, but his eyes are already scanning the verge, watchful for stones that might lame a hoof. For traders like him, the road is not an adventure, it's a livelihood. As the day wears on, the sun climbs high and the air shimmers faintly with heat. You spot a stand of trees near the road and decide it's a good place to rest. Sitting in the shade, you take a long pull from your flask and tear off a piece of bread. The quiet here is deep, broken only by the droning of insects and the occasional rustle of leaves overhead. Your legs throb with a pleasant ache the kind that reminds you you're alive, moving, doing something most in your village may never do. After your rest, you resume walking, and before long you come upon another traveler, a woman with a woven basket on her arm, her head covered by a linen coif. She's walking in the opposite direction, and as you draw near, she shifts her basket, slightly protective of whatever she's carrying. A faint smile passes between you, and then she's gone, her figure shrinking into the heat haze behind you. Encounters on the road are like that brief, wordless exchanges that leave no trace but a flicker of recognition. By early afternoon, you hear the faint chime of a bell carried on the wind. Following the sound, you crest a low rise and see a small stone chapel nestled beside the road. Its door is open, the interior shadowed and cool. A handful of travelers stand near the entrance, some making the sign of the cross before stepping inside. You join them, ducking under the low lintel. Inside, the air smells of beeswax and old wood. Sunlight filters through a tiny window, catching dust motes that drift in the stillness. You kneel briefly, murmuring a prayer for safe passage, then step out again into the light. The chapel stands at a crossroads where a handful of stalls have been set up, a kind of impromptu roadside market. A man sells earthenware jugs, a woman offers small loaves of bread, and a boy tends a pen of squawking chickens. You pause long enough to buy a heel of bread and a handful of dried apples, tucking them into your bundle. These small purchases ease the monotony of your provisions and give you a sense of being part of the slow commerce that threads through the countryside. Continuing on the road rises and dips in long, gentle waves. You pass another wayside cross, this one weather-worn and leaning slightly, its base tangled with nettles. It stands alone against the open sky, a silent sentinel marking the passage of countless feet and hooves. You touch it lightly as you pass, a gesture born of habit rather than superstition. In a time when the road can be a lonely and uncertain place, such rituals offer a thread of comfort. Late in the afternoon, you find yourself walking beside a small river. The water moves lazily between banks lined with willows, their branches trailing in the current. A fisherman stands knee-deep near the far bank, casting a line with practiced ease. He glances up briefly, then returns to his work, the water rippling around his legs. The scene is quiet, almost timeless, the kind of moment that makes you slow your pace without realizing it. As the sun begins to slide toward the horizon, you notice the road ahead bending toward a low ridge. Beyond it lies your next destination, though you can't yet see what it is. You walk on your shadow, stretching long before you, the day's warmth fading to a softer glow. Each step feels measured, deliberate, as though you're already beginning to think about where you'll stop for the night. At the crest of the ridge, you pause. Below you lies another village, smoke curling from its chimneys, fields radiating outward in neat strips. The road leads directly into it, promising shelter, a meal, and perhaps a place to sleep if you can bargain well. You start down the slope, the steady rhythm of your steps carrying you toward whatever the evening will bring. The descent into the village is easy, the slope gentle enough that your knees welcome the change from the long day's level walking. The road narrows between low stone walls, their tops crowded with moss and the occasional sprig of grass. A pair of hens scratch at the base of one wall, their feathers ruffling in the evening breeze. Somewhere nearby, you hear the steady clack of a loom and the faint hum of a tune carried on a woman's voice. As you reach the first cottages, the familiar smells of village life wrap around you: wood smoke, damp earth, and the faint tang of livestock. Children dart between doorways, glancing at you with curiosity before vanishing inside. Travel in your world is still rare enough that any unfamiliar face is worth a second look. The village green lies at the center, a patch of open ground ringed by cottages and small outbuildings. A few men are unloading a cart piled with hay, their voices low and even. To one side stands a small timber-framed alehouse, its sign swinging faintly in the cooling air. The painted image, a sheaf of wheat, marks it as the gathering place for those who want to talk, drink, and trade a little gossip. You step inside the dimness, greeting you like an old friend. The air is warmer here, scented with ale and the lingering smell of roasted meat. A handful of men sit at rough tables, their mugs catching the glow of a small fire. No one asks your business. In places like this, travelers come and go, and their stories are taken in only if they offer them. You order the cheapest ale and take a place near the fire. The bench is hard, but your legs are grateful for the rest. As you drink, you listen to the quiet talk around you. It's mostly local news, a neighbor's cow gone lame, a field of rye faring poorly, a dispute over the use of a shared well. The road feels far away here, even though it runs just beyond the door. When your mug is empty, you ask the alewife if there's a place to sleep. She shrugs toward a man near the corner, a cottager who sometimes lets travelers rest in his loft. You strike a deal for a small coin and follow him into the fading light. His cottage is simple, one main room with a hearth, a ladder leading up to a low loft filled with sweet-smelling straw. You settle there, tucking your bundle under your head for a pillow. The night passes in a quilt of sounds, the lowing of a cow in the byre, the occasional bark of a dog, the creak of timbers in the wind. Sleep comes in fragments, and each time you wake, the faint red glow of embers is still there below. In the deepest part of the night, the silence thickens, broken only by the sigh of wind around the eaves. At first light, you rise quietly. Your host is already stirring the fire, and you thank him with a nod before stepping out into the pale dawn. The village is hushed, the air cool enough that your breath ghosts before you. You walk back toward the road, passing the alehouse, now shuttered and still. The day begins with open fields again, the track stretching away between strips of tilled earth. You pass a man driving a small cart loaded with sacks, his ox plodding patiently. He calls a greeting, and you trade a few words about the weather before parting ways. Encounters like this are the rhythm of travel, brief threads woven into the larger fabric of your journey. By mid-morning, you come to a small bridge over a narrow stream. Its planks are warped but sturdy enough, the railing missing in places. You pause in the middle, leaning on your staff to watch the water slip beneath. Minnows flicker in the shallows, their movements quick and bright. The moment is still enough that you can hear the faint hiss of the current over stones. Beyond the bridge, the land begins to rise. The climb is steady but not steep, and as you gain height, the air feels fresher. From the crest, you can see the patchwork of fields behind you, and far ahead, the faint shimmer of another settlement. Between here and there lies woodland, dark and close, its edge a shadow against the sunlit slope. Woods are never entered lightly. In your time, they are places of both bounty and danger, sources of firewood, berries, and game, but also of wild boar wolves and men with less than honest intentions. The road into this one is a narrow track, its entrance marked by a weather-beaten post. A small carving on its surface, a crude cross, serves as both blessing and warning. You step into the shade and the change is immediate. The air is cooler, carrying the damp scent of earth and leaf mold. Sunlight filters through in broken shards, dappling the ground ahead. Each step muffles under the thick carpet of fallen leaves. Somewhere above, a bird calls, once then falls silent. You keep your staff ready, though you know it's more for reassurance than true defense. Deeper in, you find a fallen tree, spanning a small stream, its trunk slick with moss. The road detours around it, but you pause to rest a moment, leaning against the wood. The forest has its own slow pulse, a rhythm that makes you walk softer, listen more closely. Even the sound of your breath feels loud here. When you emerge at last from the far edge, the sun is high. The light feels sharper after the dimness of the trees, and the warmth on your face is welcome. Ahead lies another stretch of open land, and beyond it, the cluster of roofs you saw earlier. You take a long drink from your flask and start down toward it, the steady pull of the road reminding you that each village, each mile is one more step in the long thread of your journey. The slope down from the woodland edge is gentle, and the sun warms your shoulders as you follow the road toward the village below. From this height, you can see how the settlement wounds out from a central cluster, narrow lanes, threading between small thatched cottages, each with a garden patch or a pen for pigs. Beyond the fields stretch in tidy strips, their colors shifting from pale gold to deep green, depending on what's been planted. As you near the first cottages, the air fills with the mingled scents of baking bread, fresh-cut hay, and the sharper tang of manure. A woman bends over a wash tub in the yard, her sleeves rolled to the elbow, her hands red from the chill of the water. She glances up as you pass her, gaze curious but untroubled. The main track through the village is narrow, more mud than road, edged by shallow ditches. Chickens wander freely, scratching in the ruts, scattering as you approach. You nod to a pair of men repairing a fence. They pause to watch you for a moment before turning back to their work. Travelers are uncommon here, but not so rare as to cause alarm. At the village center stands a small, open green, little more than a patch of trampled grass, where people gather for announcements or the occasional market. Today, only a few stalls are set up, a woman selling onions from a woven basket, a boy offering firewood bundled with twine. The air hums with quiet barter, the measured back and forth of prices, agreed upon more from familiarity than haggling. You take a moment to rest at the edge of the green, sitting on a low stone wall. From here, you can watch the slow life of the place, a dog trotting after a child, a man leading a donkey laden with sacks, a pair of old women sharing gossip over their spinning. It is a rhythm older than memory, one that has shaped every village you've ever known. After a short rest, you ask after the road ahead. An older man leaning on a stick tells you it will take the better part of the day to reach the next town. His tone carries no warning, only the quiet fact of distance. You thank him and take your leave following the road as it winds out past the last cottages. Beyond the village, the countryside opens again, the track bordered by hawthorn hedges thick with summer growth. Sparrows flit in and out of the branches, their wings flashing in the sunlight. You pass a small pasture where sheep graze under the watchful eye of a shepherd. He lifts a hand in greeting, but doesn't call out. The bleating of the sheep and the occasional bark of his dog fill the air. The road here runs alongside a low ridge. As you walk, the land drops away to one side, revealing a shallow valley dotted with wildflowers. The colors are muted in the midday light, soft purples, pale yellows, the faint green of grasses swaying in the breeze. For a while, the quiet is so complete that you can hear your own heartbeat in your ears. By early afternoon, you come to a small stone bridge spanning a narrow river. Its arches are worn but sturdy, the parapets low enough that you can lean over and watch the water. Trout dart beneath the surface, quick flashes of silver in the green depths. You linger a moment, letting the river's slow current carry your gaze downstream until it bends out of sight. On the far side of the bridge, the road climbs toward a patch of woodland. This stretch is lighter than the forest you passed through earlier, more scattered trees than dense canopy. Sunlight falls freely here, dappling the path with shifting patterns. You walk in this broken shade, the air rich with the scent of resin and warm leaves. Halfway through, you meet a small group of pilgrims, their cloaks dusty, their faces sun-browned from days on the road. They carry staffs topped with small wooden crosses, and one wears a scallop shell on a cord around his neck, a badge of devotion marking a journey to a distant shrine. You exchange greetings, and they wish you safe travel, before continuing on their way, their voices fading among the trees. Emerging from the wood, you find yourself on a broad stretch of road. Here, the surface is surprisingly even, perhaps a remnant of old Roman paving, buried beneath centuries of dirt and wear. The track runs straight toward the horizon, bordered by open meadow. The sheer openness of it makes your pace quicken, though the sun is high and the heat presses gently against your back. In the distance, you spot a small roadside shrine, a simple wooden cross set in a stone base, a handful of fresh flowers laid at its foot. You stop briefly, not out of fear, but because these markers are part of the unspoken map of travel. They remind you that you walk a path others have walked, that your journey is one thread in a fabric woven by countless feet. Late in the day, you see the land begin to rise again, the road cutting a pale line across the slope. From the crest, you'll have your first glimpse of the town the old man spoke of that morning. You climb steadily, the light softening as the sun dips lower. At the top, you pause. Far below, the town lies gathered along the bend of a river, its church spire reaching above the cluster of roofs. The water gleams in the last of the day's light, and smoke curls from chimneys in slow, unhurried spirals. The road winds down toward it in broad loops, inviting you onward. You begin the descent, your shadow lengthening ahead of you. The day has been long, but the sight of the town promises rest, if you can reach it before night fully claims the road. The road down toward the riverside town curves gently, each bend revealing more of the clustered roofs below. As you descend, the air grows cooler, touched with the faint scent of water and wood smoke. Your boots scuff against loose gravel, and every so often you steady yourself with your staff, the tip knocking softly against the packed earth. The sound echoes faintly in the quiet, like a slow heartbeat marking your approach. By the time you reach the flat ground near the river, the light has mellowed to a warm gold. The water slides past in an easy current, catching the glow of the sinking sun. A wooden bridge spans the width, its planks worn smooth by years of cartwheels and hoofbeats. You step onto it, the boards flexing gently under your weight. Halfway across, you pause to look down. Small eddies swirl near the pilings where the river seems to murmur to itself. Beyond the town waits its narrow lanes leading inward from the far bank, like threads pulled into a knot. At the end of the bridge, a man sits on a stool beside a small table. His surcoat bears the faded colors of the local lord, and before you can pass, he asks for a toll. It's a small coin, and you hand it over without complaint. Such payments are part of the road's hidden price, another reminder that travel in your time isn't free in any sense. The man nods you through with little more than a grunt, already turning his attention to the next traveler approaching from the far side. The first street you enter is narrow, hemmed in by houses that seem to lean toward each other, as if in quiet conversation. Their upper stories jut out over the road, casting shadows that deepen as the sun lowers. The air smells faintly of bread from an unseen oven mingled with the sharper tang of tanned leather. Somewhere close by, a hammer rings steadily on metal, perhaps a smith finishing the day's work. Following the curve of the lane, you soon emerge into the market square. Even at this late hour, a few merchants linger their goods spread out on wooden tables or packed into baskets. You see pottery stacked in neat piles, skeins of dyed wool draped over a stall frame, and bundles of herbs tied in small, fragrant bunches. The hum of voices is low, unhurried, the day's bargaining nearly done. At the center of the square stands the church, its stone walls glowing faintly in the last of the light. The bell tower rises above it, though no chime marks the hour just now. Around the base of the tower, townsfolk sit on low steps talking in small groups. A boy runs past, carrying a loaf of bread, laughing as an older woman calls after him. Life here feels close woven, every face known to the others. You are the anomaly, a stranger passing through. You look for the sign of an inn, and find it soon enough, a painted board bearing the image of a stag, swinging gently in the breeze. Inside the room is low-beamed and warm, the air heavy with the smell of roasted meat. A few tables are occupied by men in rough working clothes, their mugs catching the firelight. You approach the counter and speak with the innkeeper, arranging for a meal and a bed. The price is fair enough, though it leaves your pouch lighter. Your supper comes quickly, a trencher of bread, topped with a thick stew, the gravy seeping into the crust. You eat slowly, savoring the warmth and the steadying sense of being indoors. Around you, the murmur of conversation rises and falls, punctuated by the occasional laugh. Now and then you catch a fragment of talk about the harvest or news of a neighboring town. When you've finished, you linger by the hearth. The flames shift and crackle, sending up sparks that disappear into the dim rafters. The heat soaks into your knees, easing the day's miles from your bones. After a time, the innkeeper leads you to a narrow staircase. Your room is small, with a pallet laid on a low frame and a single woolen blanket. You set your bundle at the foot, stretching out gratefully. Through the small window, you can see a sliver of the river glinting under the moonlight. Voices drift up from the street below, faint and indistinct, soon fading into the steady hush of night. You lie still, listening to the creak of the building as it settles, the faint shuffle of someone in the room next door, the occasional bark of a distant dog. Sleep comes slowly but surely, wrapping around you like the blanket pulled to your chin. At dawn, you wake to pale light filtering through the window. The inn is quiet, though downstairs you can hear the muffled clatter of crockery and the scrape of a chair on the floor. You gather your things, descending into the main room, where a simple breakfast waits: bread, a little cheese, and a mug of weak ale. After eating, you step back out into the square. The market is just beginning to stir again, stalls being unfolded, goods arranged, voices calling to one another across the cobbles. You pause for a moment, watching the life of the place unfurl like a familiar story you've stepped into for only a page or two. Then you turn toward the road leading out the rising sun at your back. The track out of town follows the river for a time, its surface still damp with morning dew. The water keeps pace with you, murmuring softly over stones. Along its banks, willows dip their branches into the flow, lifting and lowering them with the current. Eventually, the road begins to veer away, climbing gently toward open country once more. You glance back at the town's smoke curling lazily from chimneys, the bridge spanning the slow silver water, and then face forward, ready for the miles ahead. The road ahead rises gently, leading you away from the river's slow voice and into the open folds of the countryside. Early light spills across the fields, glinting on dew-damp grass. Birds skim low over the hedgerows, their wings catching flashes of white as they dart and turn. The world feels fresh again, though your legs remember yesterday's miles. You lean a little more on your staff as you climb. At the crest of the rise, you pause to look back. The town lies small now, cradled against the bend of the river. Its spire lifts clean against the pale morning sky, the smoke from its chimneys thinning as it mingles with the air. You watch until the rooftops blur into distance, then turn toward the road, unspooling before you. The track here is edged by tall grass, its surface uneven with the imprint of many feet and wheels. Now and again, a cart track branches off toward a distant farmstead. You see figures moving in the far fields, bent backs working steadily, their tools glinting when the sun catches them just right. From here, they are silent, part of the landscape's slow breathing. By mid-morning, you come to a stand of ash and elm trees. The shade offers a cool respite, the air under the leaves carrying a faint tang of earth. At the edge of the grove, a low stone trough catches water from a trickling spring. You set down your bundle and drink deeply from your flask, refilling it with the clear, cold water. Such roadside springs are treasures for travelers, their presence known and remembered by those who pass this way. The road widens briefly here, forming a small clearing where a handful of people have gathered. A peddler stands beside a cart displaying ribbons, small knives, and packets of dried herbs. His voice is low but persuasive, coaxing a young woman into examining a length of bright cloth. A boy eyes a small tin whistle, glancing toward an older man, perhaps his father, who shakes his head with a smile. These small roadside trades bring color to the day, even for those who buy nothing. Moving on, you pass into more open country. The land rolls in gentle swells, the road tracing the contour of the hills. In the distance, a lone figure walks toward you, staff in hand, a bundle slung over his shoulder. As you draw near, you exchange the simplest of greetings, a nod, a murmured safe travel before continuing on. Encounters like this leave no stories behind, but they are stitched into the fabric of the road itself. By noon, the sun stands high, and you take shelter under the edge of a small copse. Here the grass grows thick, and the ground is warm from the light filtering through the leaves. You unwrap your bread and dried apples, eating slowly, watching a blackbird hop along the verge. Its bright eye glances your way once before it dives into the grass, vanishing from sight. The afternoon's road is quieter still. You pass no more travelers for a long while, only the occasional crow lifting heavily from a fence post. The rhythm of your steps settles into something almost meditative, each footfall marking the slow drift of hours. You notice the sky shading toward a softer blue, the edges of the clouds catching faint gold. Late in the day, you crest another low hill and see far ahead the faint glimmer of water. A broad lake stretches toward the horizon, its surface still enough to mirror the fading light. The road curves toward it, dipping into a shallow valley where reeds fringe the shore. You hear the faint call of waterfowl, the soft lap of water against the bank. The air smells of damp and wild grass, a mingling of freshness and decay that marks all untamed waters. Near the lake's edge, you find a narrow track branching toward a small chapel. Its whitewashed walls stand out against the green, the roof sagging slightly under years of weather. A wooden cross rises from the peak, and a small bell hangs in an open frame beside it. The door is ajar, and you step inside briefly. The cool dimness greets you along with the faint scent of wax and stone. Someone has left a handful of rushes strewn before the altar, their green tips still fresh. Outside again, the evening light leans longer shadows gathering under the trees. The road skirts the lake for a time, its surface flashing between the trunks as you walk. Eventually, you come to a small fishing hamlet, a scatter of huts close to the shore, nets hanging to dry between rough poles. A man sits mending a tear in one net, his fingers quick and practiced. He glances up, offers a small nod, and returns to his work. You consider stopping here for the night, but the place feels closed in on itself, its people bound tightly to their own work and lives. Instead, you keep walking following the road as it leaves the water behind. The last of the day's light fades to a pale wash over the fields. Somewhere ahead, a rise in the land promises a view, and perhaps the site of your next resting place. At the crest, you find it a tiny village nestled in the hollow, its thatched roofs catching the first touch of moonlight. Smoke curls from a few chimneys, and a single lantern burns outside what might be the alehouse. Your legs are heavy, your shoulders aching from the day's miles, but the sight draws you forward. The road leads you down into the quiet heart of the place, each step bringing the promise of warmth and stillness closer. The road into the hollow is soft with packed earth, the edges lined with short, wind-worn grass. The village is quiet, wrapped in that in-between hour when the day's work is mostly done, but night hasn't quite settled. You hear the low murmur of voices from behind a half-open door, the occasional bark of a tethered dog. A faint glow spills from cottage windows, pooling in small ovals on the ground. At the center of the village, a small green opens up a patch of flattened grass, with a stone well at its heart. The well's rope creaks softly as a woman hauls up a bucket water sloshing in the dim light. She glances your way briefly, her expression unreadable, then turns back to her task. A pair of geese shuffle past their feet, whispering against the earth, their heads bobbing in the fading light. On one side of the green stands a timber-framed building, with a sign swinging above the door, a simple painted mug. The alehouse. Its small lantern flickers in the evening breeze, casting restless shadows on the wall. Inside, the air is warm with the mingled scent of ale smoke and the faint sharpness of cured meat. A few villagers sit at rough-hewn tables, their mugs cradled in calloused hands. Their talk is low, punctuated by the occasional slow laugh. You order a mug of ale, the cheapest on offer, and take a place on a bench near the hearth. The fire is little more than glowing embers, but the heat seeps into your knees, easing the ache of the day's miles. You sip slowly, letting the quiet conversation around you weave into the background hum of your thoughts. The talk here is of local matters, a pig gone missing, a fence needing repair before the weather turns the rumor of a wandering peddler expected in a few days. When you've finished your drink, you ask the alewife if there's a place to sleep. She considers for a moment, before pointing you toward a man at the far table who offers a space in his loft for a few coins. The price is modest, and you accept. Together you step out into the cool night air, the village lying still around you, under a silver wash of moonlight. His cottage is small, its door low enough that you duck to enter. Inside the room is dim, the light from a small fire painting the walls in shifting orange. A ladder leads to the loft above where fresh straw has been spread in a neat bed. You lay down your bundle, easing yourself onto the straw. The faint scent of hay and wood smoke is comforting, and you pull your cloak over you for warmth. Outside, the night deepens. You hear the soft rustle of wind in the thatch, the occasional cluck of a restless hen in the byre below. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks once, then falls silent. You drift into sleep to the steady rhythm of these sounds, as much a part of travel as the miles under your boots. Dawn comes quietly. You wake to the thin light filtering through the loft's small opening, the air cool enough to make you draw your cloak closer around your shoulders. Downstairs, your host is tending the fire, coaxing the flames back to life. You thank him with a nod, step outside, and find the village still mostly at rest. The road out curves between two narrow strips of field, the soil freshly turned and smelling of damp earth. A lone man works with a wooden plow drawn by a sturdy ox, the blade slicing neat furrows into the ground. He pauses to wipe his brow, gives you a brief wave, then turns back to his work. Soon the fields give way to open heath. The land stretches wide here, the grass low and wiry, dotted with gorse bushes. The wind moves freely across it, carrying the faint tang of something distant, perhaps the sea, though it could be only your imagination. The road is a pale ribbon ahead, unspooling toward a far rise. You walk for hours in this open country, the horizon slow to shift. From time to time, a bird wheels overhead, its shadow slipping across the ground. The rhythm of your steps becomes steady and quiet, almost part of the wind's song. There are no villages in sight, no cottages tucked into folds of the land, only the track, the sky, and the sound of your own breathing. By midday, you come to a small stand of trees gathered around a pond. The water is still broken only by the ripple of insects skimming its surface. You sit in the shade unwrapping a heel of bread and the last of your dried apples. The quiet here is so deep that even your chewing seems loud. You drink from your flask, refill it from the pond's edge, and linger a little longer before setting off again. As the afternoon wears on, the heath gives way to gentler slopes, where rough pasture land begins to appear. Sheep graze in small flocks, their white backs bright against the green. A shepherd stands nearby, leaning on his crook, his dog circling the flock with easy vigilance. He nods to you as you pass the brief acknowledgement of one traveler to another. The road bends toward a shallow valley where you glimpse the pale stone of a small bridge. Beyond it lies another hamlet, just a handful of cottages gathered along the track. Smoke curls from one chimney, drifting lazily into the sky. The light is already softening the shadows, growing longer. You know you will not travel much farther today. You cross the little bridge, the stone cool under your boots. The sound of the stream below barely more than a whisper. On the far side, the hamlet unfolds in a few modest shapes, low cottages with thatched roofs, a narrow path between them worn smooth by years of passing feet. The place is quiet, except for the soft thump of a door closing somewhere and the distant bleat of a goat. You follow the track toward the center, where a single open space serves as the hamlet's green. A wooden trough stands there, its water clear and cool, fed by a narrow channel cut from the stream. You kneel to cup your hands in it, the cold biting at your fingers. The drink is refreshing, the taste clean and sharp after the long day's walk. A few villagers appear from doorways, glancing your way without speaking. In small places like this, everyone knows who belongs, and your presence is simply noted, filed away for the evening's quiet conversations by the hearth. You nod to an older woman sweeping her doorway. She pauses, returns the nod, and continues her work. The hamlet is too small for an inn, but you spot a small wooden sign swinging outside one cottage, a carved loaf of bread. It's the baker's house, and perhaps he sells more than loaves. When you knock, a man with flour on his sleeves answers. He listens as you ask for a place to sleep, considers for a moment, then nods toward a side room. For a few coins, you can have the corner near the hearth and a blanket for the night. You thank him glad for the shelter. He sets a bowl of pottage before you, not rich but filling. The mixture of peas, onions, and a bit of barley warms your hands as you cradle the wooden bowl. You eat slowly, letting the heat seep into you. Across the room, the baker's wife is shaping dough on a board, her hands moving with quiet efficiency. The smell of yeast and rising bread hangs in the air, comforting in its simplicity. When the meal is done, you settle near the hearth, the small fire casting a soft glow on the rough plaster walls. The room is warm, the flicker of the flames making your eyes heavy. Outside, the sky has deepened to a dusky blue, the last streaks of daylight fading into the west. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks, once, twice, then the night settles again. You spread your blanket in the corner, the floor beneath padded with woven rush mats. The smell of the hearth lingers in the air, smoke, ash, and a faint hint of the bread baking nearby. You close your eyes, the crackle of the fire easing you into sleep. At dawn, you wake to the sound of gentle movement, the baker stoking the fire, his wife setting loaves on wooden boards. The air is rich with the smell of fresh bread, and you are given a small piece for the road payment, perhaps for your company, or simply a gesture of kindness. You thank them and step out into the cool morning. The hamlet is quiet, its few lanes still shaded by the low roofs. You make your way to the edge, following the track as it leaves the cluster of cottages behind. The land opens once more, fields spreading on either side, their early growth glistening with dew. A short way along, you pass a shepherd leading his flock toward pasture. The sheep shuffle in a loose cluster, bells tinkling faintly. He nods in greeting, his face weathered by years of wind and sun. The dog at his side watches you pass, its eyes bright but calm. The road here begins to climb gently. You can feel the strain in your calves as the slope draws you upward. At the top, you pause to take in the view, rolling fields fading into woodland, a patchwork of green and brown stitched together by hedgerows. In the far distance, a faint line of smoke marks another settlement, though it's too far to reach before nightfall. By midday, you find a shaded spot under a hawthorn tree. Its blossoms scatter across the ground, white petals drifting in the light breeze. You sit unwrapping your bread and tearing it into slow bites. The quiet is deep here, broken only by the hum of bees moving between flowers and the occasional call of a lark high overhead. In the afternoon, the road dips toward a small stream. The banks are overgrown with rushes, the water shallow and clear. You remove your boots to wade through the chill biting into your skin. On the far bank, you sit to let your feet dry in the sun, feeling the warmth seep back into them. Beyond the stream, the land begins to change. The fields give way to rough pasture and patches of scrub, the soil stonier underfoot. The air smells faintly of heather and dry grass. You pass a small wayside shrine, a simple cross set into a pile of stones, its base littered with withered flowers, and a few coins left as offerings. You touch the wood briefly, the old habit of seeking a blessing before pressing on. Toward evening, the road bends, and you see another village ahead, this one larger than the hamlet of the night before. Smoke rises from several chimneys, and you hear the faint sound of voices carrying on the breeze. The promise of shelter draws you forward, each step a little lighter, despite the long day behind you. The road into the larger village is firmer underfoot, pressed flat by more passing feet, carts and hooves than the smaller hamlets you've left behind. You notice the change in sound as your boots strike the ground, less muffled, more solid. The air carries the faint scent of baking and the sharper tang of fresh-cut wood. Somewhere ahead, a hammer taps rhythmically, the sound ringing in short, sure bursts. As you near the first cottages, you pass a small pen where pigs root noisily among scraps. A boy leans against the fence, idly tossing them handfuls of feed. He watches you approach, then offers a shy nod before turning back to his work. Just beyond, a woman shakes out a linen cloth, sending a soft cloud of flour into the breeze. She catches your eye, gives a brief smile, and returns to her task. The main street is broad enough for 2 carts to pass. It runs straight toward the heart of the village, where you see a cluster of larger buildings, one of them a low-roofed inn with a sign painted with a red fox. The market green lies just beyond a space alive with quiet movement. Merchants are still packing away their goods for the day, bolts of cloth being rolled, baskets of apples being loaded onto a small cart, a coop of chickens being hoisted onto a shoulder. The air hums with the soft shuffle of work winding down. You make your way to the inn, stepping inside to the familiar scent of wood smoke ale and the faint tang of roasting meat. The common room is lit by the steady glow of a central hearth, its flames low but warm. A few patrons linger at the tables, speaking in low voices. You find the innkeeper a stout man, with sleeves rolled past his elbows, and arrange for a meal and a place to sleep. The price is fair enough to keep your pouch from feeling too light. Your supper is a simple plate coarse bread, a slice of cheese and a thick stew of root vegetables and bits of mutton. The heat of the food settles into you, taking the edge off the day's weariness. You listen to the murmur of voices around you, without joining in, letting the talk drift past like a slow current. The words speak of weather, of fields of trade along the road, matters that feel steady and familiar, no matter how far you've come. Later, the innkeeper shows you to a small room at the top of a narrow staircase. The bed is little more than a straw-filled mattress under a woolen blanket. But after the road, it feels enough. You place your bundle by the bed, stretch out, and feel the stiffness in your legs give way to a slow, easing ache. Through the small window, you can see a scrap of night sky and a scattering of stars. Somewhere in the street below, a cart rattles past. Then the stillness settles in again. Dawn comes gently. You wake to the faint creak of the inn's beams and the low murmur of someone moving below. The air is cool as you dress and gather your things. Downstairs, the fire has been coaxed back to life, and a simple breakfast waits: bread, a little butter, and a mug of watered ale. You eat slowly, letting the warmth prepare you for the day ahead. Stepping outside the village feels softer in the early light. The market green is empty now, though a few merchants are beginning to set up their stalls for another day. The air is fresh, carrying the smell of damp earth and a faint trace of smoke from breakfast fires. You follow the road, as it winds past the last of the cottages, the track narrowing again as it slips back into open country. For a while, the road runs alongside a shallow brook. The water glints between reeds, moving lazily over a bed of smooth stones. Small birds flit across the water, their reflections breaking into ripples as they skim the surface. You walk with the sound of the brook, keeping pace, its gentle murmur folding into the rhythm of your steps. By mid-morning, the brook veers away, and the land begins to rise in low, even hills. The grass is dotted with wildflowers, yellow-white, and a few deep purple blooms that sway in the light breeze. The air smells faintly of crushed thyme underfoot. You meet few travelers here, only a man driving a small herd of goats along the road. The animals move in a loose cluster, their bells ringing softly. He nods to you as you pass, his eyes already scanning the road ahead for strays. Around midday, you stop at the crest of a hill to rest. The view is wide fields and hedgerows rolling out toward the hazy line of a forest in the far distance. You sit on a low stone pull out a heel of bread and chew slowly, watching a hawk circle high above. Its shadow drifts across the grass before sliding away toward the horizon. The road dips gently into a shallow valley where a few scattered farms sit behind low walls. You pass one where a woman is drawing water from a well, the rope groaning on the winch. A dog lies in the shade nearby, lifting its head only briefly as you walk past. The smell of baking bread drifts from an open window, mingling with the damp scent of turned earth. As the afternoon lengthens, the sky softens the light, taking on a warmer hue. You feel the miles in your legs, the steady pull of the road, asking more of you with each step. Somewhere ahead lies the next village, though you can't yet see it. You walk on, letting the quiet of the open land wrap around you like a cloak. The road dips once more, carrying you down toward a cluster of tall elms that mark the approach to a village. Their leaves whisper in the light breeze, casting flickering shadows that dance over the path. The shade is welcome after the open mills the air under the trees cooler, and touched with the faint scent of damp earth. You slow your pace without meaning to, letting the hush of the place seep into you. Beyond the elms, the first rooftops appear thatched, darkened by years of weather walls leaning slightly, as if the buildings have settled comfortably into the ground. A narrow lane leads into the heart of the village, the surface soft from long use. Chickens wander freely here, their feet scratching at the packed dirt, scattering whenever you step too close. You pass a small garden fenced with woven willow, the bright green tops of onions poking above the soil. A woman in a faded apron bends over her work, straightening to watch you pass. She wipes her hands on her apron, nods briefly, and returns to her planting. It's the kind of acknowledgement travelers often get in places like this, brief, polite, but without invitation. The village green is modest, a patch of worn grass ringed by cottages and small sheds. At one end stands a weathered stone cross, its base surrounded by a scatter of wildflowers that seem to have seeded themselves there. A boy chases a dog across the open space, his shouts mixing with the dog's eager barking. The air smells faintly of wood smoke hay and the sharper scent of fresh-cut herbs. There is no inn here, but you notice an alehouse tucked against one side of the green. Its sign, a wooden board with a faded image of a sheaf of grain, swings gently in the breeze. Inside the room is dim, the air cool despite the heat of the day. A handful of villagers sit at rough tables, their voices low. You take a seat near the wall, order a small mug of ale, and drink slowly, letting the simple warmth of it spread through you. When you ask about a place to sleep, the alewife gestures toward a man near the hearth. He agrees to let you use the corner of his barn for the night, and you follow him out into the evening light. His farm lies at the edge of the village, past a field where a pair of oxen graze in the fading sun. The barn is spacious, smelling of hay and animals, its loft piled high with straw. You thank him, spread your cloak over a patch of clean straw, and settle in as the light fades. The sounds of the village soften as night deepens, the creak of a door, closing, the muted murmur of voices drifting from a nearby house. Somewhere far off, an owl calls its cry, long and low. You lie on your back, watching the pale glow of the moon filter through gaps in the barn boards. The scent of hay surrounds you, and before long your eyes grow heavy. Morning comes with the rustle of movement below the farmer tending his animals, the scrape of a bucket, the lowing of cattle. You rise, shake the bits of straw from your cloak, and step into the pale light of day. The village is stirring, a woman drawing water from the well, a man mending a cartwheel, smoke beginning to curl from chimneys. You take the road out the path, narrowing as it leaves the last cottages behind. The land opens again to rolling fields, their edges marked by low stone walls. You pass a shepherd driving a small flock along the verge, the dog darting skillfully to keep them in line. He nods as you step aside, the sheep moving past in a shifting tide of wool. By mid-morning, the road crests a low ridge, and from there you can see the faint shimmer of water in the distance. It's not the sea, too still, too contained, but a broad lake or wide river bend. The road seems to lean toward it, as though drawn by its quiet pull. You walk on each step, carrying you closer to the glinting light ahead. The path skirts a meadow where wildflowers sway in the breeze and bees hum lazily among them. You pause to watch the tall grass ripple like waves, the motion hypnotic in its steady rhythm. Beyond the meadow, the sound of running water grows stronger, and soon you come to a narrow footbridge crossing a stream. Its planks are uneven, the railing worn smooth by many hands. On the far side, the road bends gently, disappearing behind a low rise. You follow it without hurry, the warm sun on your shoulders, the steady crunch of your boots keeping time with the quiet hum of the countryside. Somewhere ahead, the next village or town waits, but for now it feels enough just to walk, to follow the road as it unwinds before you. The road over the low rise opens onto a broad view. The glint you saw earlier resolves into a wide river, its surface gleaming under the soft mid-morning sun. The current moves slowly, carrying small patterns of ripples that catch the light. On the far bank, you see a scattering of cottages and the faint line of a road running onward into the hills. Between here and there lies the crossing. You follow the road as it slopes gently toward the water. Along the bank, reeds sway in the breeze, their tips rattling softly. A heron stands still in the shallows, its long neck bent toward the surface, waiting for the flicker of movement that will trigger its strike. The air smells faintly of river mud and warm grass, a mingling of freshness and earthiness that is its own kind of welcome. The crossing here is a ferry, a broad, flat boat with wooden planks worn smooth by years of feet and hooves. It is tied to a short pier, its rope thick and rough. The ferryman, a broad-shouldered man with weather-creased skin, greets you with a nod. His voice is quiet when he names the price. You pay the few coins, stepping aboard as he casts off. The ferry glides slowly into the current, the ferryman working the pole with practiced ease. The water murmurs against the hull, and you watch the far bank grow closer, the cottages taking on clearer shape. Midway across, you glance downstream and see a fisherman in a small coracle, his paddle dipping silently into the water. For a moment, it feels as though nothing here has changed for centuries, and perhaps nothing will for centuries more. On the far side, you step off the ferry onto firm ground. The road picks up again between two cottages, their gardens bright with the green of early summer growth. A woman bends over a row of beans, her hands moving steadily in the soil. She glances up, offers a faint smile, and returns to her work. The rhythm of the place is unhurried, each task fitting neatly into the long habit of the seasons. Beyond the cottages, the road climbs into low, rolling hills. Sheep graze here, scattered across the slopes like pale stones. The breeze carries the scent of grass and lanolin mingled with the occasional whiff of heather blooming in the higher ground. You follow the curve of the path, your staff tapping softly against the packed earth. Around midday, you come to a crossroads marked by a tall stone post. Its surface is rough with age, the carved symbols nearly worn away. You pause here to take a drink from your flask, leaning against the cool stone. The silence is deep, broken only by the rustle of grass in the wind. Choosing the road that leads onward, you pass into a stretch of open heath. The land rolls gently, dotted with gorse bushes, whose yellow blooms glow against the muted greens and browns. A skylark rises suddenly from the grass, singing as it climbs into the bright air. You watch it until it disappears into the blue. Later, the path dips toward a small village, tucked into a fold of the hills. Its rooftops barely rise above the curve of the land, hidden until you are almost upon them. The track into the village is narrow and lined with low stone walls, each one draped in moss and lichen. You pass a byre where cattle stand chewing lazily, their tails swishing at flies. The smell of hay and warm hide drifts out to meet you. In the center of the village, a small green opens up its grass, worn thin by years of feet and hooves. A wooden bench stands under a spreading tree, and you take a moment to rest there. The shade is cool, the air humming softly, with the sound of bees moving between the blossoms above. There's an alehouse here, a squat timber building with a sign shaped like a crescent moon. Inside, the air is dim and cool, the light from a single window falling across the rough tables. You order a small mug of ale, drinking slowly, as you listen to the quiet talk of the locals. It's the same conversation you've heard in a dozen villages, whether livestock, the slow grind of the farming year. When you ask after a place to sleep, a man offers his barn for the night, in exchange for a hand with some work in the morning. You agree it's a fair trade for shelter. As evening comes on, you walk with him to his small holding, the hills casting long shadows across the fields. The barn is clean and dry, the straw piled high and smelling sweet. You settle into your chosen corner, pulling your cloak around you, as the sounds of the countryside soften into night. Somewhere nearby, a stream murmurs in the dark, its voice steady and low. You lie back, feeling the slow pull of sleep begin as the stars wheel overhead, unseen but certain. The morning begins with the smell of wood smoke and the soft rustle of straw as you stir in the barn. The farmer is already at work outside, the muffled thud of his boots on the packed earth, blending with the low murmur of cattle shifting in their stalls. You rise, brush stray bits of hay from your cloak, and step into the cool air. The hills are pale in the early light, their folds still shadowed where the sun has not yet touched. The farmer greets you with a nod and hands you a wooden pail. Together you walk to the well, drawing up water that gleams in the slanting sun. You carry it back across the yard, the weight steady in your hands, the metal handle cool against your fingers. Once the small morning's work is done, you take your leave. The road winds away from the farm, climbing gently between two slopes dotted with sheep. The air is fresh here, tinged with the scent of heather and damp grass. Overhead, a lark sings unseen, its voice bright against the pale sky. By mid-morning, the land begins to level out. You pass through a scattering of hawthorn trees, their blossoms falling like pale confetti onto the track. Beyond them lies open country again, broad, slow-rolling fields with hedgerows marking the seams. You see the distant line of a river ahead glinting faintly in the sun. As you draw nearer, the track merges with a broader road, one that carries more signs of travel, deep wheel ruts, hoof prints, and the faint scuff of many boots. You fall into its steady rhythm, your own footsteps merging with the invisible echo of all who have walked here before. The sense of being part of a long chain of journeys stretching back beyond memory lingers in your mind. By afternoon, the river is close enough that you can hear it, a low, steady rush that grows louder as the road dips. The crossing here is a shallow ford, the water sliding smooth over a bed of round stones. You pause at the edge, leaning on your staff, to test the depth, then step in. The cold closes around your ankles, the current pressing gently at your legs. You keep your eyes on the far bank, each step firm and careful until you climb out into the grass beyond. The road leads through a meadow alive with summer sound, the hum of bees, the whisper of wind in tall grass, the soft rustle of small creatures moving unseen. You pass a lone oak standing at the field's center, its branches broad enough to cast a wide shadow. Under its canopy, someone has left a small pile of smooth stones, perhaps a marker, perhaps only a habit of passing travelers. By early evening, you crest a low rise and see your destination at last, a small town gathered on a gentle slope, its rooftops catching the last gold of the sun. A church spire rises above the clustered houses, and faintly you hear the bell marking the hour. The sight sends a quiet relief through you, though you feel the miles in your legs more keenly now. The road into town is busy compared to the lonely stretches you've walked. A cart creaks past, piled high with sacks of grain. Two women carry baskets between them, speaking in low, quick voices. You follow the main street toward the market square where the day's business is nearly done. Stalls stand half empty, their keepers stacking goods and tying down canvas covers. The air smells of bred herbs and the faint tang of smoke drifting from nearby chimneys. You find the inn easily, its sign painted with a leaping hare swinging gently in the evening breeze. Inside, the light is warm, the fire steady. You pay for a simple meal and a bed, then settle at a table near the hearth. The food, bread, cheese, and a thin but hot soup sits well after the day's long road. Later, in the small chamber upstairs, you lay your cloak across as the straw-filled mattress and stretch out. Through the narrow window, you see the last light fade from the rooftops, the sky deepening to a quiet blue. The murmur of the town below drifts upward, soft and steady, until it too begins to fade. Your eyes close and the sense of the road, the steps, the sounds, the slow unfolding of places settles in you like a memory that belongs to many, not just yourself. Tomorrow, perhaps the journey would continue, but for tonight, you let it rest. The road fades now, not in the way a path disappears into forest or bends out of sight, but in the way a long day softens into quiet. You've walked far enough for one journey, seen the rise and fall of the land, the shimmer of water in the distance, the lean of cottages against the wind. All the sounds of travel, the crunch of boots on the road, the murmur of streams, the faint calls of unseen birds have thinned into a calm that belongs only to the end of a day. Here in this small upstairs room, the air is warm with the scent of the hearth below and the faint creak of beams settling into night. Outside, the town is wrapped in its own slow breathing, the occasional low voice from the street, the gentle clatter of a door closing the last drift of smoke curling into the dark. Each sound is distant softened, as if the whole world is tucking itself away. You lie still, your body heavy with the kind of weariness that carries no sharp edge, only release. Your thoughts are like the evening mist on the fields, thin wandering content to drift where they will. The miles you've walked have slipped behind you, each step now folded into the quiet archive of the day. Somewhere the river runs on, somewhere the fields rest under the slow turning of the stars. But for now you are here in this small, still place, wrapped in the hush that comes only when the road has no more to ask of you tonight. Let the journey rest. Let your eyes close. The road will wait.